For more on this prison transfer, I'm joined by Rachel Lichman. She is a criminal defense lawyer based in Toronto. So Rachel, can you explain this process? What goes into the decision to determine if a prisoner can be transferred from maximum security to medium security?
Of course. So first of all, every at least 2 years, there needs to be a review of each prisoner, whether they be in maximum security or in medium security, and it needs to be reviewed to see whether they need to stay at that institution or less supervision is necessary and they can move to one beneath it.
So what's the difference between the two in terms of access for the prisoner?
So the main difference between maximum and medium security is that in medium security, prisoners have more opportunities to communicate and intermingle with other inmates at the institution, because it's deemed that they're not as high of a risk for security purposes within the institution, so they're not as aggressive or they're not as disobedient, and it's also deemed that there's less likelihood that they're going to try and escape. So they have more opportunities to be let out of their cell. They're not always locked up, and they have more opportunities to be able to communicate and interact with other inmates.
So this is more about the inmates' behavior in the prison than it is about the crimes committed?
110%. It's only about their behavior in the institution and nothing to do with the crimes that they have committed.
Okay, so our colleagues at Power and Politics, David Cochran, spoke to Tim Danson, the lawyer of Bernardo's victims, and I just want you to listen to what he said about Bernardo's prison transfer.
My suspicion, which I have witnessed over 43 years of practice in this area, that there is an agenda where they move serious offenders from maximum security to medium to minimum, and then improve their chances for parole before the parole board. I don't know if that's the case here or not, but it certainly, in the absence of any explanation, is one that is, there's a red flag on that.
So what do you make of that, Rachel?
Well, I think that, of course, what he's saying has to be taken in consideration as to who he's representing and what his agenda is. I think that's important to note. But this is not at all some kind of step in getting parole for Paul Bernardo. That's not at all what we're doing. That's not at all what this decision was about. This decision is a mandatory review of whether or not he needs to be in a maximum facility or not. And it has nothing to do with getting parole for him. And yes, it may be that some offenders go from maximum to medium to minimum and then parole, but that's not what it has to be. That's not what it is, just because it happens like that sometime, and I don't think that's something that's ever going to happen for Paul Bernardo.
So what do you make, though, of people who are really quite upset and angry at the idea of somebody like Paul Bernardo, a notorious serial killer, would be moved from maximum security to medium security? In their minds, they just go, how could that happen?
Well, first of all, I understand their outrage, right? Because he's one of the most heinous offenders, if not the most heinous offender in all Canadian history. So I appreciate the outrage, but I think that what is missing in the outrage is the understanding that, again, this is not some kind of track to parole. This is a mandatory review that has to be done, and all that the review has come back, the outcome of the review is saying he does not have to be in maximum. Now, keep in mind, medium security still has all the security everything that's needed in a maximum security prison to have those secure facilities is still in a medium security prison. They're just allowed a little more time outside of their cells. They're just allowed a little more freedom within the institution walls. So the security is still exactly the same, but I would urge people to really understand and really appreciate this does not mean he's getting parole at all whatsoever.
But could it mean, because there's been such visceral reaction to it, could there be, and we know that the Corrections Canada is reviewing the transfer, could he be moved back from medium security to maximum security? What would it take for that to happen?
Are you asking if the public outrage is enough to move him back from medium to maximum?
Sure.
No, it's not. And I appreciate a lot of people don't want to hear that answer, but it's not, right? We have laws, we have legislations, we have acts that exist whether or not the public appreciates them or likes them or doesn't like them. And I understand that in this situation the public doesn't like them, but I think one thing that again is missing from this public outcry and understanding that is missing is that this is there, these rules and these laws and these reviews are there to ensure fair and due process. And everybody wants fair and due process when it's someone they know or when it's something they care about or something that means something to them. But as soon as it's someone as heinous as Paul Bernardo, again, arguably one of the most heinous person in Canadian history, we don't want any fair process or due process to apply to him. But I think what people really need to understand and appreciate is that if we take those rights away from the most heinous person in Canadian history, we are taking those rights away from every Canadian that exists within Canada.
Let me just ask you this in terms of process. Could the minister intervene? Could there be some kind of intervention from the political level that tells Corrections Canada to move him back to maximum security?
There can be an intervention, yes, and there can be something that will move him back, and it can be from a political standpoint. Yes, it can be. That can happen.
All right, Rachel, appreciate you taking the time to talk to us. Thank you. That's criminal defense lawyer Rachel Lichman in Toronto.
Thank you.